Mission from Middleburg Island to Buayan in the Philippines, 650 miles to the northwest. At dawn on September 6th at Middleburg Airfield, Mitchells had checked and gassed for the 11.5-hour mission that lies ahead. First large-scale bombings of the Philippines had started September 1st. Harassing attacks in the Davao area had begun a month before. Now the 25s were to function as part of the sustained air attack which preceded the Philippine invasion. P-38s, which had taken off from Biak at 4 o'clock that morning, refueled at Middleburg and took off again at 7. Flying escort on these raids, they operated at the greatest distance from their base in the history of the Southwest Pacific Theater. Flying over the coastline toward Buayan at the head of Sarangani Bay, southwest of Davao Gulf, the Mitchells prepared to drop low to make their runs at 100 to 200 feet above the target. The fighters, too, came down to treetop level to help the 25s strafe the area. This was the first strafing raid over the Philippines and the first use of parademo bombs. Ack was heavy and rough evasive tactics were used. There was no interception. At this Boayan field, repair shops, motor parks, and barges along the shore were damaged, and many large fires and explosions followed the bombing and strafing attacks. At the same time, liberators were hitting airfields and shipping facilities in the Davao area. Continued strikes like these by 25s and 24s, together with China-based B-29 attacks and naval smashes, had, by the time invasion came, crippled air bases, docks, supply and repair facilities, had cost the Japs at least 1,400 planes and more than 200 ships sunk or damaged. Target, Langoan in the Celebes. During September, a series of raids on the Dutch East Indies augmented the Philippines' preparations and seriously threatened Jap fuel and supply lines at their southeastern source. Major target in these raids were airfields, here especially the installations and supply dumps at Langoan. Target, Somate in the Dutch East Indies. The next day, September 18th, the Somate strip was hit as part of this pattern to neutralize principal Jap airfields in the Moluccas. Target, Boela on northeast Saram. On September 25th, Mitchells hit the airfield, fuel tanks, and main jetties at Boela in an attack against Jap fuel oil and gasoline supplies in the area. The airfield at Poltava in the Russian Ukraine is used by the American Air Force as an operating base in shuttle bombing operations against Germany. On the night of June 21st, the German Air Force made a successful surprise raid against this field. On the overcrowded base that night were 73 8th Air Force B-17s, 6 transports, 3 photoplanes, and a P-38. Most of the American forts had just completed half of their first shuttle bombing mission from England. Arriving at 15 minutes past midnight in a perfectly timed and well-executed attack, the Germans destroyed 47 forts on the ground. More than 400,000 gallons of gasoline dispersed outside the field were also destroyed. Bombs had been stored in perimeter revetments. It took 3 weeks to put the field back into full operation. More than 1,000 American personnel were in the camp area. 2 were killed, 6 wounded. 30 Russians were killed, 95 wounded. Russian warning reached American headquarters at 2335 hours. Demos and short delay demos, many small incendiaries and anti-personnel bombs were dropped from medium to high altitudes. After a 15-minute pause, low-flying planes strafed for 20 minutes. In all, 110 tons of bombs destroyed 50 American and 1 Russian aircraft, damaged 29 American and 25 Russian. Soviet anti-aircraft, mostly small caliber, was continuous. Night fighters intercepted the 80 Ju-88s and HE-111s which took part, but destroyed none. Following the Poltava bombing, a United States Army investigating board recommended dispersal rules and extensive camouflage, both of planes and all airfield facilities. Further German attacks on American-used bases in Russia were not successful. Target, Ploesti, center of Romania's oil industry and the richest oil fields in Europe. These scenes from captured German film showing the blazing results of continued air attacks were taken during April and May of 1944. These pictures of the Concordia Vega refinery, second largest in Ploesti, were taken during and after the attack of April 24th. The air battle of Ploesti, one of the greatest sagas of the war, ended August 19th, 1944 after 24 attacks. Save for 2 attacks in 1943 by the 8th and the 9th Air Forces, a small P-38 mission, and 4 attacks by RAF night bombers, the campaign to level Ploesti was carried out solely by the 15th Air Force. These attacks, between April 5th and August 19th, 1944, cost us 223 heavy daylight bombers out of 5,479 attacking, as well as 18 night bombers, 36 fighters. 2,200 airmen were shot down, but 1,166 of these were returned to Italy between August 31st and September 3rd of this year. We destroyed 188 enemy planes in the air. Against fierce resistance from flak, fighters, and the most effective smokescreen yet experienced, these attacks destroyed 90% of Ploesti's vital oil installations, virtually eliminated it as a rich source of fuel for the Luftwaffe and Wehrmacht, a source from which Germany took 1/3 of her oil needs. Smoke from the burning storage tanks at times completely obscured the sky, blotting out all light, even at midday. Capacity of refineries was reduced during this time from 709,000 to 77,000 tons crude output per month. Gasoline production was cut from 177,000 to 15,000 tons per month, a reduction of 91%. This loss to the enemy represented a major triumph in the history of strategic air warfare. The result of these attacks, proof that oil refineries could be knocked out with a reasonable economy of force, placed oil at the top of strategic priorities and started the intensive air campaign against both synthetic and crude Nazi oil installations. Another attack against the same refinery on May 30th caused this roaring inferno. When Ploesti fell to the Russians on August 30th, 4/5 of its refining capacity had been destroyed by bombing, a loss equivalent to half of all oil produced in 18 of our greatest oil-producing states. During September, the commander of the Mediterranean Allied Air Forces and the commanding general of the 15th Air Force inspected the bomb damage at Ploesti and visited the Astra Romana Refinery, largest in the area. This was a cracking plant. The importance of this target is indicated by the grim battle the enemy made to save it. Outer anti-aircraft defenses of Ploesti were oval-shaped, with the north-south axis 30 miles long and the east-west axis 20 miles long. Inner defenses formed a belt around the town, studded with 240 heavy anti-aircraft installations, one of the 3 densest concentrations in Europe. The 3 principal airdromes in the area were supplemented by 2 alternate bases and a number in the Bucharest area to the south. Barrage balloons were raised at night from 6,000 to 10,000 feet. Ploesti and its suburbs comprised 19 square miles, but two dummy towns had been constructed several miles to the east and to the northwest of Ploesti to deceive attacking bombers. The enemy's increasing defensive tactics required a complete alteration of bombing technique after the first few missions. Flak, as heavy as it was, did not cause losses inconsistent with the high priority value of the target. And enemy interception became weaker as destruction of fighters and aircraft plants forced the Nazis to disperse their air strength to protect widely scattered industries. But smokescreens, initially ineffective, became Ploesti's major defensive weapon and made normal visual bombing virtually impossible. However, all of the enemy's defensive measures were overcome and the attacks were pressed home with success. Damage to the Romano Americano plant, 3 miles east of the town of Ploesti, was also inspected. This installation was the third largest refinery at Ploesti, with an annual capacity of 727,000 tons. Here too, the powerhouse, storage tanks, cracking and distillation plants were demolished. The entire Ploesti oil region was closely built up with refineries and pumping stations interconnected by railway. This refinery, the Concordia Vega, was the second largest in the area. It had a refining capacity of over 1 million tons. By the 19th of August, 5,500 tons of bombs had toppled most of the 16 oil refineries and storage depots in the main Ploesti area and 3 in outlying districts. Capture of Ploesti by the Russians last August brought to the Allies the world's 6th richest petroleum source, much of which was pre-war controlled by American and British interests. Aachen, gateway to the Rhineland and first German city to be taken by American troops, fell October 20th after a bitter 18-day siege. Meeting fierce resistance, the American First Army penetrated the city from its eastern edge after crossing these tracks on October 10th. On this day, the city's encirclement was forged. All major roads had been cut, and the garrison was given 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. The German High Command rejected the ultimatum, and methodical destruction of the historical city was begun. As tanks and tank destroyers battered the outskirts, 9th Air Force dive bombers started softening up the exceptionally strong fortifications within the city. Delayed action bombs were largely used in these assaults. Up to now, weather had deterred the American air effort. Some reinforcements, moving under cover of storm and darkness, reached the defenders, but major attempts to relieve the city failed when our infantry and artillery repelled strong counterattacks. Air power effectively reduced strong points, but taking the city was an infantryman's battle, a short-range battle in which hand and rifle grenades and pole charges played decisive roles. GIs helped aged evacuees get to refugee camps. Some had been hiding in cellars for weeks, were dirty and half-starved. About 15,000 of a normal population of 150,000 had remained. 1,500 prisoners were taken. The other 1,000 that comprised the defending force had been killed or wounded. Tank destroyers blasted civilian shelter bunkers that stormtroopers had converted into fortresses. And a tank dozer battered through the railroad station to make a detour passageway for tanks after the Nazis had blown up the main road viaduct leading into the city in a vain effort to stop the American advance. GI stalked snipers in the final assault, while 20mm Nazi guns raked the streets from all sides. However, our losses were relatively light. Additional tanks rolled through the wrecked railroad station, while the hunt for the last enemy remnants continued. the furious defense of Aachen seemed to forecast the great exertion that will be needed to envelop and reduce other German cities. Planes, trains, and trucks were principal victims of fighter planes during August and September. Selected gun-sight aiming point camera scenes afford first-rate examples of how fighter pilots have been sharpshooting their way through Germany.